A young woman asked a biker to fix her dad's old bike. Hell's Angels helped keep his memory alive. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. I am not selling it for scrap, Clara Yates said, but her voice came out too thin for the words she was trying to protect. She was 26, white, exhausted, and standing with both hands flat on Vernon Slade's counter, as if the edge of that scarred plywood could keep her upright for one more minute. 3 overnight shifts had left a gray half-moon under each eye. Her black work shoes were wet, through at the seams, and the folded repair receipt in her coat pocket had softened, where the paper kept rubbing against the last $43 in cash she had saved for parts. Vernon Slade slid a purchase form toward her with 2 fingers and tapped the blank signature line. Storage fees start at $40 a day. After 5 o'clock, Clara. That old engine is dead, and you know it. Sign, take the scrap money, and stop pretending your father left you a miracle. Behind him, the repair bay smelled of rusted metal, wet concrete, old tires, and oil that had been wiped across too many lies. Then the light from the open shop door narrowed. A broad-shouldered man in a faded Hell's Angel-style denim cut stepped inside, his beard streaked with gray, his hands dark with engine grease, his steel-toed boots leaving damp marks on the floor. Silas, Forge, Donovan did not speak. The 3 adult bikers behind him did not speak either. They came in slow, all white men old enough to carry weather in their faces, one with a shaved head, one with a silver beard, one with a scar running across his knuckles, from work, not violence. They spread without hurry, one near the open front door, one beside the tire rack, one near the side aisle stacked, with belts, filters, and cracked plastic bins. They left every exit open. They made the room smaller anyway. Vernon's parts counter sat under a buzzing strip light, crowded with loose spark plugs, a 9/16-inch wrench, rubber fuel hose, a coffee-stained invoice pad, and a cracked jar of valve caps priced at $3 each. Clara turned first, startled, then stiffened because men like that usually meant trouble in places like Slade Salvage Repair. Silas looked past Vernon and down at the motorcycle beside the bay wall. It was a 1974 Harley-Davidson shovelhead, with worn black paint, dull chrome, and a dent on the left side of the tank shaped like a thumbprint. Clara's father had put that dent there 20 years earlier in a driveway mistake he laughed about, until the year he died. Now the bike leaned under a shop light, with its side cover removed, its loose parts arranged too neatly on a red rag. Customer area is up front, Vernon said, louder than necessary. Silas lifted his eyes to him, calm and heavy, then lowered them back to the engine. Clara swallowed and gathered the receipt tighter in her fingers. She wanted to explain that she had not slept more than 4 hours since Monday, that the bike was not transportation or money or metal to her, that it was the last place where her father's hands still made sense. But pride held her mouth shut. Vernon mistook the silence for surrender. He pushed the form closer. 5 o'clock, Clara. Silas finally moved. He stepped to the counter, picked up the dirty 9/16-inch wrench, weighed it once in his palm, and set it back down with care. Then he looked at Clara, not above her, not through her, but straight enough that she could breathe again. "That bike still yours?" he asked. Clara's answer came out small, but it held. "Yes, yes," Clara said again, and the words steadied her more the second time. "My name is still on the title." Vernon's jaw shifted, but he kept his hand on the purchase form like paper could become a wall if he pressed hard enough. Clara looked from Silas to the 3 bikers behind him and felt the old fear that came from being outnumbered in a place where every shelf, tire stack, and grease-dark corner belonged to someone else. She thought they had come for the bike too. Men with denim cuts, heavy boots, scarred hands, and gray in their beards usually knew the value of a 1974 shovelhead before a clerk finished saying the year, and Clara had already been offered $600 by Vernon like he was doing her a favor. Silas saw the thought cross her face. He did not crowd her. He lowered his center of gravity beside the counter, resting one oil-stained hand near the jar of valve caps, without touching her receipt, and took off his dark glasses with the other hand, so she could see his eyes were not hunting for a bargain. The shop stayed tight around them, 12 feet from the counter to the repair bay, maybe 6 feet between Clara and the old Harley, with stacked tires pressing in from the left and metal shelving leaning under alternators, dented oil pans, belts, filters, and coffee cans full of bolts sorted by size. Autumn drizzle ran down the open doorway behind the first biker, carrying damp air into the room, until the smell of rusted metal mixed with wet leather and old rubber. Vernon gave a short laugh through his nose and spread his hands toward the watching adults near the bay. See? This is what happens when emotion gets ahead of sense. She thinks every stranger in a vest is here to save a dead engine. Silas did not answer. The biker with the silver beard folded his arms near the tire rack, keeping enough distance to show he was not blocking anyone. The shaved-headed biker stood by the open front door, with one shoulder turned toward the rain, leaving the path clear for anybody who wanted to leave. The third remained near the narrow side aisle, silent beside boxes of spark plugs marked $4.99 each. Their stillness did more than Vernon's voice. Clara felt it first as pressure, then as space. For once, Vernon was not the only man deciding what the room meant. He tapped the paper again. Title or not, storage starts at 5. I told you the motor is beyond repair. I can haul it out with my scrap load in the morning and save you the grief. Clara's thumb rubbed the torn edge of her receipt until a small curl of paper lifted away. You said you replaced the fuel line, she said, forcing herself to keep her chin up. Vernon shrugged. I inspected it. Different thing. Silas's eyes moved to the red rag beside the bike, where the removed side cover and 2 clean washers sat too neatly, dry against a floor stained for years. He looked at Clara again, then nodded once toward the motorcycle. May I look? She hesitated, because letting one more man touch the bike felt like handing over another piece of her father. Then Silas reached into his own pocket, pulled out a folded cotton shop rag, and placed it on the counter between them, clean enough to use, dirty enough to be honest work. He pushed it toward her, not as charity, but as something practical. Clara wiped her fingers, breathed through the rust and rain in the room, and gave a small nod. Look, she said, but it is not for sale. Clara kept her palm on the old Harley's fuel tank as Silas stepped closer, not because she believed she could protect the machine from him, but because touching that cold metal was the only thing keeping her from signing away the last piece of her father. The dent on the left side of the tank sat under her fingers like a familiar scar, shallow and oval, dulled by years of wax and road dust. He rode this bike to work for 28 years, she said, and she hated how much the room heard in that one sentence. Vernon rolled his eyes toward the adult customers near the bay, 2 white men in canvas work jackets, and a white woman in a county maintenance shirt holding a box of wiper blades. That does not make the engine worth saving, he said. Grief does not rebuild compression, Clara. Silas crouched beside the bike, without answering him. His knees bent slowly, one broad shoulder blocking part of the light. From the repair bay, his faded denim cut darkened along the seams by mist from outside. He did not touch the tank first. He looked at Clara, waited for her nod, then placed 2 oil-stained fingers on the frame rail and studied the engine, as if it deserved patience before judgment. That small pause changed something in her face. Vernon had handled the motorcycle like junk from the moment it rolled through his door, but Silas treated it like somebody had loved it before it arrived here. Clara pulled the folded receipt from her coat pocket and flattened it on the counter. The total was $1,180, with $300 paid in cash, $220 charged to her debit card, and the rest marked pending in red pen. The paper listed diagnostic labor, fuel system inspection, engine failure beyond economical repair, and a storage warning written below in Vernon's blocky handwriting. I worked 3 shifts for this, Clara said. A breakfast shift, a warehouse close, and weekend cleanup at a laundromat off Route 18. I did not bring it here because I wanted a miracle. I brought it here because I wanted someone honest to tell me what was wrong. That landed harder than shouting. Vernon leaned forward, his forearms planted on the plywood counter, face tightening with irritation instead of shame. I did tell you. You just did not like the answer. One of the Brotherhood bikers shifted near the tire rack, not forward, not toward Vernon, only enough for the chain on his wallet to settle against his jeans. He stayed silent. The open doorway remained clear behind the shaved-headed biker, rainwater trailing across the threshold and cooling the shop by a few degrees, maybe down into the low 50s Fahrenheit. Silas reached toward the counter and took the clean rag he had given Clara earlier, wiping a streak of moisture from the chrome edge of the side cover. He did it carefully, not for shine, but to see. Your father keep his own tools? He asked. Clara nodded. In coffee cans, sorted by size. He painted the 9/16-inch handles red because he used them most. Silas glanced at the wrench lying on Vernon's counter. Its handle was red under the grease. Clara noticed at the same moment and went still. Vernon saw both of them see it. Plenty of wrenches come red, he snapped. Silas did not respond. He moved his gaze from the wrench to the side of the engine, then to the red rag, where two clean washers sat apart from the older grime around them. He was not ready to accuse anyone. Not yet, but the shape of the lie had begun to show. Silas stayed crouched beside the shovel head for a long moment, and the longer he said nothing, the more Vernon seemed to need words. You people always think a wrench makes you an expert, Vernon said, his voice cutting across the tight shop and bouncing off the shells of oil filters, brake pads, and boxed belts. I have been buying dead bikes for 15 years. I know scrap when I see it. Silas turned his head just enough to look at the lower engine mount, then the fuel line, then the small shadowed space behind the side cover, where most customers would never think to look. Clara followed his eyes, but all she saw at first was metal darkened by old oil and the dull shine of one bolt head tucked half-hidden under the frame rail. It looked ordinary. That was the cruel part. Silas lifted his grease-blackened hand and pointed with two fingers, stopping an inch away from the bolt without touching it. That was backed off recently, he said. Vernon's face hardened. No, it was inspected recently. Different thing, Silas said, giving Vernon back his own words, without raising his voice. The woman in the county maintenance shirt stepped a few inches closer, still holding the box of wiper blades against her chest. One of the adult men by the bay leaned to see around a hanging air hose. The Brotherhood did not move in on Vernon, but their silence widened around him, the shaved-headed biker still beside the open front door, the silver-bearded biker near the tire rack, the third man watching from the side aisle, with his arms folded under a patchwork denim cut. Rain kept drawing gray light through the doorway, and the damp air made every rusty shelf smell sharper. Clara stared at the hidden bolt until the shape of Vernon's lie finally reached her. The washers on the red rag were clean because they had not been lying there long. The side cover had been removed for show. The red-handled 9/16-inch wrench on the counter was not just a tool her father might have used. It was the size needed to reach the place Silas had found. Her stomach tightened. You told me the engine was dead, she said. Vernon's fingers curled against the edge of the purchase form, wrinkling the paper near the signature line. It is dead. A loose bolt does not change a blown motor. Silas stood slowly, broad enough that the strip light above the counter threw his shadow across Vernon's invoice pad. He did not step closer to Vernon. He stepped back from Clara instead, giving her room to stand beside her own motorcycle. Title is hers, Silas said. She gave permission for me to inspect it. Vernon pointed at the bay floor. This is my shop, and that is her bike. The sentence was plain. It held. Clara looked at the motorcycle the way she had looked at her father's empty workbench after the funeral, trying to decide whether hope was mercy or punishment. Silas reached toward the counter, but before taking the wrench, he looked at Vernon again. Say it in front of them, he said. You are claiming this engine cannot run because it is beyond repair. Vernon's throat moved. He glanced at the customers, then at the bikers, then at the open door he was not blocked from using. There was no trap except the one he had built. That is my professional assessment, he said, forcing each word out with a sharp edge. Silas nodded once, picked up the red-handled wrench, and turned back toward the old Harley. Silas carried the red-handled wrench to the left side of the shovel head, then stopped before he touched anything. He looked back at Clara. "Your receipt," he said. Clara understood what he meant only after a second, and that second showed how tired she was. She stepped to the counter, pulled the softened paper from under Vernon's purchase form, and spread it flat beside the cracked jar of valve caps. The red pin marks looked cruel under the strip light. $1,180 total, $520 already paid, $660 pending, and beneath it Vernon's storage warning written in block letters, with the 5 o'clock deadline circled twice. It was 4:37 p.m. on the round wall clock above the parts shelves. 23 minutes had been used as a weapon. The woman in the county maintenance shirt set her wiper blades on the counter and leaned in just enough to read the line that said engine failure beyond economical repair. One of the men in the canvas jacket took off his cap, not dramatically, just slowly, like his opinion of the shop had begun to change. Vernon saw them reading and snatched for the receipt, but Clara's hand landed on the paper first. Her fingers trembled, yet she did not move them away. Silas did not turn around. The Brotherhood did, not toward Vernon with threat, but toward the counter with attention. The shaved-headed biker by the open door kept his boots planted beside the wet threshold, leaving a clear path past him, into the drizzle. The silver-bearded biker near the tire rack lowered his chin and watched Vernon's hand, until Vernon pulled it back. The third biker near the side aisle shifted one step away from the stacked boxes, making the aisle wider rather than narrower. Their silence made the facts feel heavier. "This is private business," Vernon said. His voice had lost the easy edge it carried before. "No," Clara said, surprising herself. "This is my receipt for my motorcycle." Silas placed the wrench on the floor beside his boot and used his fingers first, testing the hidden bolt with careful pressure. It moved too easily. He did not make a show of it. He simply looked at Clara and then at the adults near the bay, letting them see the truth in the smallness of the movement. "A bolt like this on a running shovel head does not back itself off this clean," he said. Vernon barked out, "That old bikes shake, old bolts loosen, old owners imagine value. That is not there." Silas let the words pass. He picked up the 9/16" wrench, fitted to the bolt head, and paused before tightening. "You wrote beyond repair," he said. "You offered $600 for scrap. You circled storage at 5 o'clock. And this bolt was sitting loose behind the cover." Clara's eyes moved from the wrench to Vernon. The math was simple now. Vernon had not just misjudged the bike. He had built a deadline around a lie. Rainwater traced a thin line across the concrete from the open door, and the smell of rust, wet rubber, and machine oil seemed to settle over everyone at once. Silas tightened nothing yet. He waited. Vernon had one last chance to tell the truth before the motorcycle did. Silas gave Vernon that last chance without saying another word. He simply kept the 9/16" wrench fitted around the hidden bolt and waited, one knee bent beside the old Harley, his wide back blocking part of the repair bay light, while water from the open doorway cooled the concrete behind him. Vernon looked at Clara's receipt, at the adults watching from near the bay, at the 3 Brotherhood bikers standing apart, with every exit still open, and then back at the bolt he had hoped no ordinary customer would ever notice. He chose pride. "Go ahead," Vernon said, his mouth tight, and his face blotched red under the strip light. "Turn a wrench and embarrass yourself." Silas accepted the insult like it weighed nothing. He tightened the bolt, with steady pressure, not hard enough to strip old threads, not fast enough to look like a show, just the measured pull of a man who had spent 30 years learning when metal was asking for force and when it was asking for respect. Clara watched his hand and remembered her father in their narrow driveway, a white towel tucked into his belt, telling her that old machines did not forgive impatience. Silas stopped after the first turn, checked the washer seat with 2 fingers, then adjusted the angle and tightened again until the loose space disappeared. It took less than 2 minutes. That was the worst part for Vernon. The lie had taken invoices, pressure, a fake deadline, and a scrap offer. The truth needed a wrench, patience, and enough witnesses to keep it from being buried. Silas did not try the ignition yet. He moved through the rest of the motorcycle with quiet discipline, checking the fuel line Vernon claimed he had inspected, looking at the petcock position, tracing a wire near the coil, testing the throttle return by feel, and making sure the bike was stable on its stand. The silver-bearded biker near the tire rack watched the door, not Vernon. The shaved-headed biker wiped rain off his sleeve and kept the front path clear. The third biker picked up a loose cardboard box that had fallen near the side aisle and set it back on the shelf, making the floor safer without saying a word. Their power was restraint. Clara saw that too. These men could have filled the room with anger, but instead they filled it with attention, and attention was exactly what Vernon had not planned for. "You are wasting everybody's time," Vernon snapped, but sweat had gathered at his temples despite the low 50s air coming through the door. The woman in the county maintenance shirt looked from Vernon to the red pen on the receipt. "If it runs," she said, calm and adult, "that line on the invoice matters." Vernon turned on her. "Stay out of it." Silas finally stood and held the wrench flat in his palm. His fingers were black, with oil, the old scar across his thumb pale against the grease. He looked at Clara, not Vernon. "Your father ever teach you the start routine?" Clara's throat tightened, but she nodded. "Fuel on. Choke set. No rushing the throttle." Silas stepped back from the bike and gave her room beside the tank. "Then you do it," he said. "It is yours." Clara stood beside the old Harley with the key in her hand, and for a moment the whole shop seemed to lean toward her. The 4:41 p.m. Light above the parts counter washed the red ink on Vernon's receipt until the words "beyond economical repair" looked even uglier than before. Silas stood half a step behind Clara's right shoulder, close enough to guide her, if she needed it, far enough to make clear the choice belonged to her. He pointed once to the fuel valve, then to the choke, then to the throttle grip, using the same slow order her father had taught her in their driveway years ago. Clara's fingers trembled when she reached down, but she did not pull away. "Fuel on," she said under her breath, not as a prayer, but as memory returning to the right place. "Choke set. No rushing the throttle." Vernon crossed his arms, trying to look bored, but his left foot kept shifting on the stained concrete. "This is theater," he said. "Old bikes cough before they die. Do not confuse noise with repair." No one answered him. The brotherhood stayed in their quiet places, 3 grown men in wet denim cuts and heavy boots, faces weathered, arms still, every exit open, and every light trapped in plain sight. The woman in the county maintenance shirt held Clara's receipt against the counter with one hand, so the storage warning could not be hidden beneath Vernon's purchase form. One adult customer in a canvas jacket stepped back from the bay wall to give Clara a clear path around the bike. The other watched Vernon instead of the machine. Clara turned the key. Silas watched the fuel line, the side cover, the washer seat, and Clara's hand all at once. He was not looking for drama. He was looking for safety. Clara pressed the starter, and the old engine resisted for a breath, then caught with a deep mechanical vibration that rolled through the frame, up through the tank, and into her palms. The shop changed. Loose receipts lifted at their corners on the counter. A stack of thin cardboard parts boxes shivered against the shelf. The hanging air hose swayed an inch beside the bay. Clara did not move. Her eyes filled, but she held herself upright, both hands on the motorcycle her father had left behind. Vernon's face drained first, then flushed hard, and sweat gathered along his upper lip despite the chill coming through the open door. "That does not prove anything," he said, too quickly. Silas reached down and adjusted nothing. He only watched the engine hold steady. After one small correction Vernon had called impossible, that silence did more damage than accusation. The county maintenance woman looked at the receipt again. "You wrote dead engine," she said. The man in the canvas jacket pointed at the loosened side cover and the clean washers on the red rag, and offered scrap price before 5. Vernon opened his mouth, then closed it, then looked toward the door. The shaved-headed biker near the entrance shifted aside, leaving the path even wider. Vernon did not take it. There was nowhere outside. That could make the facts smaller. Clara finally looked at Silas. He gave one short nod, then set the red-handled 9/16" wrench on the plywood counter beside Vernon's purchase form. "Metal," Paper and truth sat inches apart under the strip light. "Shut it down when you are ready," Silas said. Clara kept the engine running only long enough for every adult in the open bay to understand the truth, not to shame Vernon, not to celebrate, but because for the first time in months, her father's old bike was answering her instead of being priced by someone who never cared what it meant. Clara let the motorcycle run until Silas lifted 2 fingers, and then she turned the key back with a care that felt almost ceremonial. The old engine settled into stillness, leaving behind the smell of warmed oil, wet concrete, and rusted shelving, and every adult in the shop understood that something larger than a repair had just happened. Vernon reached for the receipt, but the woman in the county maintenance shirt kept one palm on the paper and looked at him with the calm expression of someone used to reading work orders that could not afford lies. "You wrote beyond economical repair," she said. "You circled a 5 o'clock storage deadline." Then the bike ran, after one hidden bolt was tightened. Vernon's throat worked, and he tried to pull his anger back into a shape that sounded professional. "Old machines are unpredictable," he said. "Anybody who has worked around them knows that." Silas wiped the red-handled 9/16-inch wrench with the cotton rag, then set it beside the clean washers on the counter so the parts told the order of events without needing a speech. "Then write unpredictable," he said. "Do not write impossible." The words were quiet. They stayed there. Clara stepped closer to the counter, her shoulders still rounded from months of exhaustion, but her hand no longer shook when she picked up her title folder. The folder was soft at the corners, the clear plastic sleeve inside cloudy from age, and her father's name still appeared on the older registration copy tucked behind her own transfer form. She placed it against her chest. Vernon looked toward the front door again, and the shaved-headed biker moved farther aside, giving him enough room to walk out, if he chose. That made the moment worse for him, not better. No one trapped him. He was standing inside the open consequences of his own work. One of the canvas jacket customers spoke from the bay wall. "I brought my pickup here Tuesday," he said. "You told me the alternator bracket was cracked. I want my estimate printed before I leave." The second customer nodded toward the shop's service board. "Mine too." Vernon's face tightened. His business was not collapsing because someone threatened him. It was loosening because people had started paying attention. Silas turned to Clara. "Ask for 3 things," he said. "In writing." Clara looked at him once, then faced Vernon. "Cancel the storage charge," she said. Her voice was low, but the room carried it. "Correct the invoice. Return every part you removed from my bike." Vernon started to argue, but the silver-bearded biker near the tire rack only shifted his gaze to the red invoice pad. The message was not force. It was witness. Vernon pulled the pad toward him and wrote with short, angry strokes. "Storage fee waived. Prior engine assessment corrected. Customer retains ownership. Removed parts returned." He tore the sheet free and shoved it across the counter, then reached under the back shelf for a small cardboard tray holding the side cover screws, the 2 washers, and a clamp marked with yellow paint. Clara checked the tray against the motorcycle like her father might have done, one piece at a time. Silas did not touch the money in her hand. He did not ask Vernon for a refund in a way that would turn the shop into a fight. He only pointed at the paid line on the receipt. "Parts not installed," he said. Vernon stared at the number, then wrote a refund receipt for the uninstalled parts, before opening the cash drawer and counting out $220.20 and a folded $5 bill for the clamp charge he had added that morning. Clara took the money slowly. It was not enough to fix everything in her life. It was enough to prove she had not been foolish for holding on. Outside, the drizzle kept falling across the salvage yard, darkening the old tires stacked along the fence and turning the gravel into a strip of brown shine. Inside, Clara folded the corrected invoice once, placed it behind the title, and looked at Vernon without lowering her eyes. "I am taking my father's bike with me," she said. Silas nodded to the Brotherhood, and the 3 bikers moved not toward Vernon, but toward the motorcycle, clearing a safe path through the narrow shop aisle. The Brotherhood cleared the aisle without touching Vernon or his counter, moving tires, a bent drip pan, and a cardboard box of brake shoes, so Clara could walk the old Harley out under her own name. The silver-bearded biker checked the front tire pressure with a pocket gauge and said nothing, while the needle settled at 28 pounds, low enough to matter, but safe enough to roll slowly. The shaved-headed biker lifted the loose side cover into the cardboard tray with the washers and clamp, then handed it to Clara with both hands, like even the smallest piece deserved to come home. Silas stayed beside the tank, one oil-dark palm resting near the dent her father had left there, his wide shoulders turned slightly away from Vernon, so the moment belonged to Clara and not to revenge. "Do not ride it far today," he said. "Fuel line needs a real inspection. Rear brake needs adjustment. And that tire has age cracks near the rim." Clara looked down at the worn Blackwell tire, then at the $220 Vernon had returned, folded inside the corrected invoice. A few minutes earlier, that money had felt like survival. Now it felt like a first step. "I know a garage 40 miles south of here," Silas said, taking a shop card from his vest pocket and writing an address on the back with a dull pencil from the counter. "Old man named Ellis runs it. No games. He will let you stand there while he works, if that helps." Clara took the card carefully. "I cannot pay for everything today." Silas nodded toward the bike. "Then you pay for what keeps you safe first." That was all. No speech. No promise to fix her whole life. Vernon stood behind the counter, with the purchase form still lying open, useless now, his name printed at the top of a lie that had been corrected in his own handwriting. The two adult customers waited for printed estimates, watching him with faces that had changed from trust to measurement. The woman in the county maintenance shirt made a note on her own receipt sleeve and gave Clara a small nod before carrying her wiper blades toward the door. Outside, the autumn drizzle had turned the salvage yard dull silver, beating on hoods, chains, broken fenders, and the black seats of the Brotherhood's motorcycles parked in a line along the fence. Clara pushed from the left grip, while Silas guided from the right side, and the old Harley rolled over the shop threshold with the slow weight of something saved from being mislabeled. At the edge of the covered awning, Clara stopped and looked back once, not at Vernon, but at the narrow counter, the red-handled 9/16-inch wrench, and the place where she had almost signed away her father's memory for $600. Her eyes filled again, but this time she did not hide them. "He used to say, 'Every machine tells the truth if you listen long enough,'" she said. Silas glanced at the bike, then at the rain-dark road beyond the yard. "Your dad knew metal," he said. Clara smiled very small, because that was the first thing anyone had said all day that did not make her feel poor for loving something old. The Brotherhood did not crowd her goodbye. They stood under the awning, with their boots on wet concrete, hands quiet at their sides, while Clara tucked the corrected invoice inside her coat and placed the shop card behind it. She eased the motorcycle forward, one careful foot at a time, toward the covered side of the lot, where she could wait for a tow truck to Ellis's garage instead of risking the road on cracked rubber. Silas stayed at the doorway until she was clear of Slade's sign, his faded denim cut dark against the gray light, rain sliding from the roof edge in thin streams, as Clara's father's bike rolled slowly into the mist, with its dented tank catching the last pale strip of afternoon. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.